And so the way this hopefully will run is that I will not talk all of the 2 hours that we have together, but as I said, that we'll have plenty of time at the beginning, around 20 minutes or so, I hope, to answer your questions. If you have any questions in the meantime, in the middle of it, I have absolutely nothing against it. In fact, I feel much more welcome if you do. Then please just raise your hand or just speak, in fact. But I guess I also see if you raise your hand or if you want to type in the chat, any approach is welcome. And I know that different people have different preferences. So let's jump right in. I'll be talking to you, hopefully this is not a surprise, about gender inclusive approaches in your industry, so to say, in the business of reuse and circular. But I will say two things. One, I'm an entrepreneur myself, and everything that is not aligned with business success or does not, in the best case, further it, gets put to the roadside. And the good thing that I'll start with, all of the thoughts that I'll do, I'll try to link them back to how they can benefit your business, because in the end, if the business doesn't exist, then we can be as exclusive as we want. We're not going to make any progress. So that is that's the number one that I will say. And also all of the things that I'll be talking about, or most of them, they're not just applicable to circular economy models. I hope that some of the examples will be geared more towards that, but please bear with me that I also want to bring it in a wider context of how gender topics, gender considerations are going to benefit or can benefit businesses and startups. So that's a little bit of a long way to start, and you'll probably forgotten it by the end, but what I hope that you'll remember is one of my favorite ways to start on any given topic, especially ones that are close to heart. And maybe you've heard it. It's a very famous approach, I would say, by somebody called Simon Sinek, who famously said, always start with the why, right? Why are we even talking about this? Why is this? Why should you listen to this? Why should you spend your time thinking about it? Why gender equality? Why gender inclusion, right? And this is actually true for all of the stories that you tell to everybody about your business, to your partner, in life. If you start with a why, you'll generally have you get a better response from people. So why gender equality, right? Well, of course, we can say, if we take all of the various genders, and most often, of course, we think about men and women, but there's others, and I'll talk about it. If we take all of them in their full abilities into account, with all of their potential that they have, but also some of the differences they might have, we will be able to be not just more happy and make people feel more welcome, but we will also be able to see the world from different angles, foster innovation and working together. And if I had to put it in short, I do believe that gender equality also in business makes us more successful as a business. I said this before, and it makes all of us more safe. And this is a very important aspect as well, as you probably know. And I also brought some numbers to show that. Why am I talking to you about this? Well, you already, as I know, received the slide. For those of you who haven't had a look at it, I'll say a few words about myself, and then I would love to just do a quick round where you just say what are you with your business working on? What is the topic that you're working on? And ideally, if you can, in a short sentence as well, what life stage of the business are you in? So have you just started, already selling products, already have a larger team, or have been in business, and have 30 team members or so for a longer time? That would be great. So cannot say that I didn't warn you, but I'll give you some time. First up, why am I talking to you? So I founded a social enterprise. I've did other things before, worked as an economist, worked in research. I studied development economics, worked in India and Rwanda, Bangladesh, some different places for the World Bank, for Ministry of the Economy. So I really tried different ways to have an impact. But I think the main and important step is that I founded a social impact company called Share. You can look them up on the internet. And throughout the DACH region, so Germany, Austria, Switzerland, what we do is that we sell food, drink, personal hygiene products, and some others, and we donate 1-for-1. So you buy something to eat, and automatically you donate a meal to somebody. You buy something to drink with the Share brand, from the Share brand products, and automatically somebody gets access to clean water that might not have it otherwise. And you can track on the packaging where the donation is going. It would be important to say also that our products are not very premium, so they're just normal supermarket products. And the magic that we do essentially is that we're not doing regular marketing. So we're using the marketing spend instead to donate. And my co-founder and my experiences from working, for example, with the United Nations World Food Programme, is that especially in emergency refugee camp situations, with school meals, in situations of drought, etc. If you're working in large project, this individual help, so one meal, can be actually very affordable. And if more people had access to doing good easily in their everyday life, more people would do it. So this was our thought. We started with this now 8 years ago, and have been reasonably successful. So around 200 million products that we sold in this way to over 4 million customers. And around 100 cherries, so our employees that are working with us on making this a reality. It's been incredibly fulfilling. And because neither of us founders was actually originally from the food industry, I think we asked more questions around the product themselves as well than others. In particular, important for this round of people, we developed the first 100% recycled water bottle that can go in a loop and get recycled again, and worked a lot on the packaging. We also are selling some water in reusable containers on a local basis. And we generally thought a lot about, the composition of the products, but also the packaging and how it becomes more circular, more able to be recycled, reused, or otherwise composted, or whatever is possible for this specific product. As you can see from the products that are floating around my head, we have a lot of different ones. So the challenges are different for each of them, but generally, a lot of thought went into this topic. So this is hopefully why I can add a little bit about this. Then I guess I'm also a female founder, and as I know, also in South Africa, it's still an issue. We don't have enough female founders, and especially not enough female founders that are actually willing to scale their business. So you have single entrepreneurs, often women that start small businesses because there is not formal employment for them. And that's a little bit different, right? So that's not necessarily being an entrepreneur out of choice. But what really drives forward the wealth creation in a country, and also the personal development, is if you're starting something that you're with the intention to actually make it grow. And that's there. We don't have enough women. We don't have enough diverse people. And Mark, hey, do you already want to introduce yourself? Please take the chance, but also you have a question.
My mic is muted. Two questions. I think everybody here knows me. Like, hi, my name's Mark. I'm working with a company called Smartful, one of the founders, and we are providing more affordable food and home care products to the poorer communities of South Africa, Zambia, Kenya, and Bangladesh. We're currently live in 4 countries. But I very sneakily took a look at your share.eu, and you are a 3-to-1 founder ratio. And what I'm trying to say is that founder ratio is not a statistic. It should be considered on a case by case basis. So why was your case a 3-to-1 male to female ratio, since we're talking about that exact subject?
Yeah, absolutely. So one was actually a late co-founder who is coming in a little bit later, and we took him in for his expertise. The three of us in the beginning. So I think there's two answers to your question. One is back in 2017. It wasn't so much on the agenda yet that you would really benefit from having a diverse team. So when my one co-founder and me, we knew each other. We have known each other for years before. And then we didn't actually, for bringing somebody else in, we didn't think, oh, it would be better if it were a woman, but also there were just three of us. So it was a little bit, one man, one woman. We could have tried to find somebody more diverse, but it wasn't so much on our radar. And then the other thing is that, when we then started to hire people for the management team that we later built, we by then already had experienced, however, that it's much more useful for us to then focus on bringing in a good and balanced ratio of different genders and perspectives, especially when it comes to a brand that you develop, because a brand ideally speaks to a particular group of people, and we believe the people that we can speak to, they are also in large parts females, right? And so when we hired the management team, we put a lot more attention to this. But in the beginning, I believe now it was a massive asset. So I hope that we had different experiences and backgrounds and had sort of naturally one female founder because we knew each other. But even in that, in this sort of imbalance in the founder team, we were much more than conscious about the management team. So I hope that answers your question. Like, basically, we were not doing best practice at the beginning, but we tried to catch up, and we felt the benefits of it. So it wasn't an academic exercise. It was more like, well, we really want to have more females in here now, because the discussion and the way it evolves is actually different, right? If you have a much more mixed team. And I guess, you've been on this earth for a while, so you probably know this. If you're in a group of just men, I have many men who tell me that, the discussion works differently, and they're not necessarily enjoying it more also. So, and we noticed this when we started hiring. Thank you for your question. But you have another question.
It's quite interesting what you say. Well, more of a sort of follow-up. A number of times you said that you were pretty much hiring for the merit, and I know you didn't say the actual words merit, but you were saying that our organization had more of a female customer base, therefore it made sense. Yeah. And that's what I was alluding to. I've been searching for it, and I read some research about 10 years ago, and I cannot for the life of me find it. So consider this anecdotal. But what the research I read said was a homogeneous organization as a startup, when you're looking at below 20, 30 people in the organization, and not homogeneous being all male, being all black, being all Indian, being all female, not that homogeneity. What is the damn word? Anyway, being homogeneous in that you are all well known amongst each other. So startup groups with founders who are colleagues, working together, friends, all that kind of stuff, grow more rapidly in the beginning, because it's simpler to align everybody.
There's trust, yeah.
As soon as you get to 25, 30 people, that's when you need to start going to a heterogeneous environment where you're starting to hire people who you don't know. And then you can start saying, okay, you know what I mean? So the scale of heterogeneity in the beginning actually hampers a startup. But as soon as you start scaling, that's where heterogeneity kicks off and is more required, which I thought was an interesting dynamic, because the first 25, you hire for how do you work together and can you get the job done? Yes, no. It's that simple.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
you start looking at social dynamics, customer dynamics, all those kind of other human resource kind of components. But you don't need an HR department until you hit 50 people anyway. So they sort of align.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's my my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, super interesting. And I will say, I mean, when I said we started building out a management team, this was probably around that time, right?
Yeah.
Because in the beginning, we didn't.
Everybody does everything.
Everybody, yeah. And we were the management team. I mean, we were already like 3.5, right? Basically 4 after, before we launched products. And that was it for some time. And then what we hired next were people that were very young and just helped us, like extended arms and legs, right? Really. So a lot of very young folk. And then I would say about a year later, after we launched, we had grown to around 25, 30, in fact. And that's when we really put a lot of thought into second level management, so to say, and that's when actually our lives got a little bit better as well, because you then, if you hadn't realized it by then, you then hopefully realize that you cannot do everything by yourself.
Yep.
And having these different perspectives also helps. And you have a little bit of time to afford, and hopefully resources some to that goes into the thinking process, like the strategic process of what comes next, which is not necessarily always the case when you just start out, right? Because then you're just kind of doing, trying to survive, etc. So I can intuitively sort of mirror what you say, although I haven't read that particular piece of research. It's really interesting. And what I would boil it down to is a lot about trust, right?
Yeah.
And it is. I mean, I'm very certain that the more similar people are to you, the easier it is to trust them. That's an unfortunate thing, but that's sort of human nature, right? But if we manage to get over those barriers, what we find is very interesting as well. And I think in the long run, the business success is it's vital to have different perspectives. If you're not just, I guess, if you really have a very, very narrow customer group that is in itself very homogeneous, well, maybe that's different. But then also your company will not get very big. So, well, Mark, thank you a lot for the question here. Let's move on with what's ahead today. So we have quite a bit to cover. I hope to take like a 10-minute break in between. Let's see. Hopefully we have enough time. Basically, you can think of it in 2 blocks, though. First, I want to give you a little bit of some facts and figures and some definitions and terms on what is it that we're talking about and why, what signs do we have that it's an important thing. And then in the second part, I'd love to talk to you about how can we then change something, what are approaches to work on gender inclusiveness, one inside your company and inside your leadership team, and then also with customers, right? To be more aware and also maybe to change strategies. And then there's hopefully some time for questions. So let's jump in. Well, I mean, I'm not sure, of course, how much you thought about the topic of gender inclusion and gender equality, but when I actually started actively thinking about it, I felt that there were a lot of terms floating around, and it can be a bit vague. What is it that we're talking about? And so sometimes it helps to go with a little bit of a definition. And I actually wanted to look for a definition that is rooted in your context. And I'm glad to say that actually South Africa is a place that has was one of the early movers on including in law gender equality and what it is. So here it goes. It's in the amendment to the Commission for Gender Equality. And what I find interesting about the definition that you can read here is that here we have women, men, and people of all genders. So I'll get to this in just a little bit, but I will mainly be talking about men and women, which is just a little bit easier to handle in the presentation. But keep in mind, of course, that there are that it is a spectrum and that there might be people that don't identify with either. and that they also bring a different perspective. And then the other thing that I will find interesting, or that I find interesting in the South African definition, which I think is very suitable, is that equality here is about an enjoyment of rights and responsibilities as well. So it's not just on the rights that you have or that you should have, but also as the equal share of responsibilities. So it comes with, equality comes with an sort of passive part. You get some rights, hopefully. You should enjoy those rights, but you also have responsibilities to be active and to act on giving those chances and interacting with people of different genders in your society. And then I found it very nice also that the South African Act mentions that this doesn't mean that men and women will become the same. There are differences, inherent ones, through birth, through biology, but also through socializations. But that independent of that, their rights and responsibilities to live a good life are the same. And I'll get a little bit to that part about equality versus equity that is already in this definition that I think is very interesting and good to keep in mind when I think about some of the criticism that people bring when you start talking about gender equality. Now, a little bit different, but just towards the topic of this talk, gender inclusion, is basically the efforts to get to gender equality, right? And you can read it for yourself as here as well. But basically, gender inclusion is the way to get to gender equality. In case you wonder, right, or if you were unclear about it, this is also what is in South African law. And again, I think South Africa was very proactive in sort of very early to include this in this constitutions or in the laws. I mentioned it before. I will mainly be talking about men and women, but it is a spectrum. There are people that don't identify as either. They're transgender people. They've received, I guess, some more attention in global media in the last years. That are also part of the spectrum. Gender diverse is sometimes a term. It's basically all to say I do recognize that it's not black and white, and it's not a 1 and a 0 essentially. But for sake of this talk, I'll more often refer to men and women, but I have that in mind that it can also be a diverse set of genders. To make that a bit more tangible, and you notice I'm running through this quite fast, but I just want to be sure that you've heard all of it, and then if you have questions, please shout them out. I just want to put a few terms out there that you might have heard and maybe we're not entirely clear about. One that is very important, I think, to keep in mind, I hinted to it earlier, is equality versus equity. Why is that important, right? We talk about achieving equality and the benefits that brings. We'll get to that benefits in a little while. But what we often really want to achieve is equity. And I sometimes refer this to if you imagine you're in a race, like a track race that you can see here in this picture, for example. So equality means that we give everybody the same resources. Gender equality means giving them the same resources, regardless whether they're men, women, or otherwise. So you have everybody start on the same start line, like you see here in this picture, right? Equity actually would mean going one step further. And I think in an ideal world, we want to have that because there might be people that actually start from different places, right? So if you stay with the picture of the race, you could have people that are older or younger. Yeah, you have people that maybe have some physical defects. Maybe they can't walk like other people can, or they don't see as well, for example, right? People start out in different places. And so if you wanted to make it fair so that everybody has to be the same, has to put in the same effort to finish first in the race, or to race across the finish line, you would actually need to put the place where people start at different places, right? Some people maybe would have to run further and others less far, because they come with different capabilities. In the reality, it's often very hard to distinguish this. And we see this in the discussion around, for example, preferential hiring, preferential admissions to universities, etc., where there is a lot of discussion around should we give people then preferred access if they come from disadvantaged backgrounds, or to increase diversity. And I will just say there is no right or wrong answer that I want to give to that. It would be cutting it much too short. But these practices are a way to enhance equity. But it is very hard to get it right, for sure, because you cannot to determine how much extra benefit a person should get, how much less they have to run in the race, like how you move the starting line is very difficult. So in many cases, we're happy if we actually get to the point where everybody gets the same resources. And even that is a challenge. But this is basically the difference between equality and equity, and hopefully can work on a world of equity at some point. But for the moment, I would be very happy if we get to a point of equality at some point. Sex versus gender. People get confused about it. I will be talking about gender in this talk. Why? Because sex is also important, but it refers to the biological differences. And as I mentioned earlier, there might be people that are biologically male but identify as female, and the other way around. And it refers basically also to the gender refers to the expectations that we have towards male and female, mostly in the society. And that is what drives our behavior. So this is what's important to me, not the biological differences. And then I will be saying something about gender roles and the gender lens. I think gender roles, all of you are very aware of it. I can speak for the German context, right, since I just had a kid. And even my mother, who's obviously a few years older than me, she asks me, well, how many years are you going to stay home now with the kid, right? And I say, well, actually no years. Like, I want to continue working. I love what I'm doing. And for her, in her mind, the gender role just says if women have kids, then they should stay home for several years. Again, I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but it's kind of the expectation from society, what people do, right? What is appropriate, given that people are seen as men or as women. And then if you use the gender lens, however, that's something slightly that's different, because this is something that actually, the gender roles, that is what society just kind of does, right? And you can never quite get free from that. But if you're using a gender lens, it basically means that you're thinking actively around what are the different implications for different genders, the different implications from policy or programs, but also the different implications maybe from using your product, or the different implication of their lifestyles on whether or not they would buy and consume your products, right? So it's being aware of the differences that society assigns, and also that are in the lives of men and women, that make them behave differently, and how does that interact with your products. And I can already say this, no surprise, I would encourage you very much to take this gender lens sometimes really actively and think about how might our customers, how might within my organization, the dynamics work differently for men and for women. And you will find interesting things and often valuable things for your company. What might keep you from seeing clearly on these implications, however, is something that we also cannot avoid, much like the gender roles that we assign to people in our society, and that is that people have biases towards how men or women are acting, right? They have expectations that they keep often without being aware of it. So often unconscious. There are different types of biases. Maybe you've heard of some of them, like, for example, availability bias, or availability bias is the one that is now available at the top of my head. But there's different ones on not just on gender. That means that we're not thinking completely objectively about a situation or person. And again, often it's unconscious. And Mark, I saw your hand. Just let me say, discrimination, on the contrary, is the stronger form that is often the result of having this bias that you don't even recognize. And that is then unfair treatment, right, of these groups, of different groups. So while I say bias is not necessarily avoidable always, if you're becoming aware of it, you can often avoid discrimination, and that's often that's a way to to improve the situation, not just for your businesses, but I think for just living together in society. Mark, you had a question or a comment?
Yes, we have a very interesting, and I like the way you are bringing this back into an actual product side of things as well, as opposed to just generic social structures. In Bangladesh, we found a 65% male purchasing, the consumer, 65% male, 35% female. In South Africa, it's the exact opposite. Kenya, it's about 60% female, 40% male. So from a really interesting perspective, our dispensers need to have the screen with the user experience, the buttons that you push at eye level. So we are now going, okay, the average male in South Africa is 169, the average female is 158. How do we position the screen for the user interface? And the user interface changes. Every country, every product, everything changes. And we can't just say that, let's just average the height of male and a woman across the globe and say, boom, there's your product. That doesn't work either. Yeah. How would you solve that? Because that's not biases, that's not discrimination. That's just, how do you fit a round peg in a square hole when it comes to men and women who are purchasing?
Yeah. Oh, and Mark, I love that example. And if I bring it back to the definitions here, or the terms, right? You're actively taking a gender lens to understand how do I make my product work for the different groups of customers.
I wouldn't say gender lens. We did user-based service design. Our user in South Africa happens to be predominantly female. We didn't take a gender lens because that was never our objective. Our objective is, who is the user? The user is X. Let's design for that.
No, I do get this. But basically the result of it was that you saw, gender is is one factor that you can find, and it's also different across different countries, which would be, I'd love to talk more to you about that, what your hypothesis is, why that is. And I would say, so to say, taking the gender lens, kind of understanding how do purchase decisions get made in the different countries, what are the places where you're sold and how accessible are they maybe to men or women? Those are all considerations I'm sure that you will be doing. With respect to the height of the screen, I mean, that's very interesting. And obviously, I'm not, I haven't thought about this for a very long time, but I just wonder, for example, if you could then say, well, if this is a really important criterion, maybe I can try to sort my customers into men and women, by changing the attributes of the products, the way it speaks to people or the places it gets sold, so that women will more tend to go and to that one place or to that one side of the store, or and men will go to the other, or in different places you do different things. And when they self-sort, you could try to adjust to the differences there, right? I mean, this is just the top of my head thought, but I think it's amazing that you're thinking about it, because it can be a real, it's the small things, especially in consumer goods. I know this very well from our work. We said retail is detail. And this is so true, right? You need to really think about the details.
Yep.
Otherwise, you might miss something that will, people will not even see your products. In this case, they will not even recognize it. And it's not because they don't like it. It's because they literally maybe don't see it. So one, I applaud you to think about it this way. And B, if you can get customers to self-sort, that would be, that would be a fantastic thing.
But
I'd have to think more about it if I want to be more, if I want to have smarter suggestions than that. That's the first one that comes up.
Cool.
Great. So great. We already had a concrete example here, which I really love. The last definition or different terms that I want to throw out here to keep in mind is around preferences and quotas. So this is probably not as relevant in the product context, but more in the policy context. And I know that in South Africa, there's numerous quotas for things on hiring or on preferences, also in terms of racial preferences for jobs and backgrounds, etc. So this is obviously a very active topic, and you probably know more about it. You most certainly know more about it than I do, but just to keep in mind, preferences might be one way to further the participation of underserved groups, whether it's women, whether it's ethnic minorities, and basically help them get to places, get to jobs, get to resources. And then quotas is basically one specific type of preference, but it's very common, especially in the jobs market, is that, just saying, like, you see this red chair on this picture, in our management team, we need to have at least one female. That would be a quota, right? And that's a very common way to increase participation, like a hard tool, so to say, whereas preferences is more a softer version of that. And I will say that I used to be very critical of quotas, especially as a younger woman, because I didn't want to be, say, a quota woman. But what I can share is that there's actually very good evidence especially when it comes to participation in companies, but also in political places like town councils, etc., that if you have a quota and get a minority group into your group, it might feel strange to the minority person that gets put on because of the quota, but it does change the perception over time, and does actually help to basically create a virtuous cycle of then bringing in more minority representatives naturally. And so while it's a little bit awkward sometimes, it actually has proven to be an effective way to get the ball going. So if you ever come across that, don't be so dismissive maybe from the first moment, because actually good scientific evidence that it helps to change situations that are very entrenched, that are not changing by themselves. All right, well, enough of definitions. Let's look at some numbers. I picked out some numbers on how does gender equality look like worldwide, an important topic, and in South Africa, right? So a lot of this is not very happy making, but here we go. It shows, I guess, that it's important. One is the gender wage gap, right, which maybe some of you or all of you will have heard about. It refers to the fact that women, mostly it's women, and minorities earn significantly less than men on average. So worldwide is 16%, and in South Africa it's even 22%. And this is usually a mix between women earn less because they take different jobs that are paying less, which is, it's more difficult to change because it also means that you need to change, how attractive are those jobs? How do people get hired in these jobs? And this is a long process. But there's also a part about women and men doing exactly the same job and women getting paid less. And I will say, I believe that we should change in our companies first, right? And this is coming in the second part on how you can be mindful about this, because not all of it is just active discrimination. Sometimes it has to do with how women negotiate for salary, for example. And sometimes it has to do how they display themselves, how we perceive them. And we as leaders in companies can take an active role in decreasing the wage gap here. And South Africa, clearly also, this is an issue. Educational attainment comes before, I guess, you start making money. At some point to sustain yourself, you will go to school or learn something, get an apprenticeship, etc. Here I have good news. So while still worldwide, girls on average have somewhat less schooling than boys, half a year. In South Africa, actually, women have been catching up very quickly, and even in tertiary degrees, so university degrees, you see that it's the same level. And what you also see worldwide is women actually start getting ahead in getting educational degrees. Now, this is, of course, an interesting topic in itself. We will not go too much into it, but if you have kids yourself, it's a worldwide trend that for better or worse, once women are given the chance to get an education, they often actually are more able to work in the system to actually get a degree. So some people are already arguing that we need to support boys to do better in school because they're not doing as well as girls. But it's a very recent change. And I would say a positive change. So if we now need to support boys more at some point, well, then we've achieved something, right? Because we made women catch up and more. Healthcare and safety. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, gender equality is also about safety. And safety, again, of course, has a lot of relevance to how you can run your business and how customers will be able to come to you. One fact that I found so fascinating, and that has come up in recent years only, is that when we look at how women get treated medically, a lot of the research and trials that are done on medications and treatments are done on men, often on men only, but often also with the large majority being men. And for example, in the treatment of heart attacks or in the diagnosis of heart attacks, that's a very striking one. Females tend to have a different signs when they have a heart attack that have then not been described to people and to doctors as much, so they wouldn't recognize it as much, right? And so more women are dying from heart attacks when they have them. They tend to have fewer heart attacks, but often they're then misdiagnosed if they have them. And I think that is just terrible and something that we can very much change as a society. The other striking one, and I cannot go without mentioning it. I'll show you another statistic from South Africa that I found absolutely striking, is the topic of sexual violence. And this is not a South Africa particular problem. Oh, sorry, this should be South Africa instead of AL. So 1 in 3 women worldwide has experienced physical or sexual violence, and this is the same in South Africa. And what is particularly terrible and worrying is that the female homicide rate is at 6 times the global average. So, I don't need to tell you this. I'm sure you read it in the papers. I'm sure this is a topic of discussion. It is also relevant to your customers, right? Do they feel safe buying your products? Do they feel safe going to the places at the times, in the ways, and the products themselves to buy them? And it's very, I think, relevant to think about. Josephine, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think this is such a pertinent topic. What you mentioned about the homicide rates in South Africa, gender-based violence is a very serious problem. And you said something a few sentences ago, which was interesting about us reading about it. But I think something that I didn't expect to go through myself is having members of the team, for example, that go through something like gender-based violence or domestic issues. And one thing you mentioned in the economic participation is as leaders, we should be intentional about ensuring that we have women are paid equal or they are paid fairly. But one thing that I think you don't learn at school or you don't learn in business school is how do you deal with such issues when you're a leader? I think it becomes more psychological. It becomes like, how do you step in? Where do you start and end? It's such, because if someone is going through something, it affects how they work. It affects their performance. And it's honestly, it's something that when I dealt with it, in fact, a few weeks ago, I didn't really know how to approach the topic. And because we're also a small team and it's not like there's an HR you can call. But it's just like it's like, where do you turn to and how do you deal with something like that? Because it's someone's personal issue, yes, but where does as a leader, where do you stop and start in terms of helping your people and your team?
Yeah. And Josephine, and it's something, by the way, I've also personally had a case in my team of a young woman getting sexually harassed by a potential supplier and business partner of ours, right? And I'm very happy that she opened up about it and we could talk about it. And I think, the first step certainly is to have a working environment where when people feel unsafe in some part of it, they are it's safe enough for them to talk to you as their leader and their their team lead or their superior. Once you've achieved that, I think that is already a lot, because then what is the next step is very individual, right? It can be that it's enough to talk about and find a solution, and the person can deal with it themselves and feel safe in changing something. It can be that it's crossing boundaries and you need to ensure that you're talking to somebody who's outside of the organizations because it's criminal behavior. And it can be that that person needs to change workplace, etc. So obviously there's many different ways that the issue can get solved. What I'm trying to encourage you, though, is basically work as much as you can on creating that space where women, men, young, old people, basically everybody works with you, but women is often the most drastic cases, feel safe to talk to you and find a solution together. And especially when you start your company yourself, it often feels like it's sort of your family as well. At least it was for me. And then especially the first hires often are very close, and you spend so much of your time. But I guess in a way, especially as the company grows, it's important to also understand it is not your family really, and you need to, of course, in some way also deal with it professionally. Because, for example, for your family, you might say, "I do everything it takes to make this work," right? But in a professional setting, you might not be able to solve the situation, and it's not your responsibility necessarily. But I think it is your responsibility to create the space to allow the communication to happen and to see, can this person then stay with the company, or can other people stay with the company? If there's an issue, for example, between two employees that is creating unsafe spaces, you wouldn't to your family say, somebody now needs to leave forever. But in your company, you might well have to do that. So again, endless topic. I don't have the answers, but Josephine, that you heard about this and people were willing to talk to you about it. that is the most important thing that you need to ensure as a leader, because then you can find solutions. If you don't even see it, and that is the most common thing, then there's no solution that you can offer. So, Leah, sorry, you had your hand up for a while.
No, yeah, thanks so much. And thanks also, Josephine, because Josephine and I met on Friday, and we had a discussion around that topic as well. And Iris, maybe one of the things that I've also put in the chat is obviously that there are differences in terms of cultural context, right? And I really like that you took into consideration the South African context and did some kind of research. Yeah. What is the context here? But yeah, I mean, one of the topics that Josephine raised is really the point of how to deal with the cultural difficulties around, especially GBV. And you mentioned it before, like women and girls are ahead now in terms of the curve, in terms of education, in terms of income. Apologies.
Income, unfortunately, we still have a gap, but definitely
education.
No,
income is a gap, but in terms of education and striving for these kind of things, but that especially for businesses like what Josephine raised, what Marcus raised in terms of how do you bridge that kind of gap? What are mechanisms that can be put in place in a business to navigate those kind of things, right? I think this is something, and you have worked in diverse contexts, cultural context as well. So maybe your advice on that would be appreciated as well. Maybe one thing, and I don't want to make it now about GIZ or something, but I just want to talk about a couple of things like having like sexual harassment policies, having like contact points, posters of certain contact points if people feel harassed, if people experience gender-based violence. Would that be something that you would advise on, or would you rather build on the level of trust in this small business context?
Yeah. And thanks, Lee. And I saw there's many more questions there, and maybe we'll also get to some of them a little bit later so that they'll fit in with the context. So apologies if I'm not just now going through all of them. But to your direct question at the end on, is it the personal relationship, or is it the information and making available information on help, right? So I don't want to always say it depends, and actually I do have a strong opinion on providing information. So basically, and that is, if you're able to provide outside information on increasing safety for women or minorities, then no matter how small the company, there's probably some place for some poster or a box where you can put this information, right? So that people can just get it. And I think we should always do this. We had information on this in our bathrooms for women, right? It just had like a small poster with a number on information. And it served two purposes. One is, of course, inform about possibilities to get support. But also it just kind of kept the topic somewhere at the top of mind, right? So that people became more aware of it. So this is something that you could always do. On the other hand, I think it doesn't substitute for creating as a team lead, especially for your direct reports or the people that you're directly working with, to create the space, right? And there's never really a good moment, I guess, that doesn't have a bad event first, where you just suddenly start talking about gender-based violence, right? It's not like it comes up on a lunch table, right? But I guess if there are things in the news or related to your customers, just even talking about it, because it's, there's something that happened and that was reported in the news, or you heard something about another company or whatever, being sort of vocal about it and just kind of mentioning it can already help to signal to your employees, hey, it is okay to talk about these topics, right? So it's these small things that creates a space that is safe enough for people to bring up issues, and it's not either or. It's not just the information, or it's a sort of everyday thing in the behavior to signal, ideally frequently, that it's okay to bring up personal topics. It's okay to bring up topics regarding safety, of course, because then you can solve them. That's, I guess, the point that I wanted to make. And I'll keep up the chat so we can come back to some of the questions later. I'm just mindful of the time, so apologies if I try to rush through a little bit. It didn't change. There you go. Sorry for changing. So I did this on another country comparatively, and this is why it says AL here, but I'm talking about South Africa, don't worry, on political representation. There's actually good news, a piece of good news again. Let's balance the good and the bad. The political representation of women in parliament is actually quite high in South Africa. I think it might be higher than in Germany. And we just took a step back with this current government again, so it doesn't only go one way. But worldwide, there's still 3 out of 4 representatives in parliaments are men. And in South Africa, it's actually almost, not quite, let's say 60-40 men, women. So that's, I guess, some positive news. And then, just coming back to the gender bias. So many of the things we do not see, right, and how people kind of perceive different genders differently. And I don't exactly know how UNDP measured this, but they say 9 out of 10 people worldwide have some gender bias. If you do surveys on, can men and women do things different? Are they the one more better in math than the other? So whatever, kind of biases around genders. Most people have it, right? So we just need to accept that it's there, these biases, and we need to work with it. And then, I think this picture is a little bit grainy, but I think you can see what I wanted to highlight. Again, this topic on gender-based violence, it did come up just already, and it is certainly in South Africa a very prevalent topic. When surveyed, and I think this was 24 only. So very recent survey on what difficulties do young women face in different countries, like what is top of their mind. Then actually South Africa is the country where the highest share of women report that gender-based violence is a concern for them, right? So it is. It's almost 60% of people that are worried about, young women that are worried about this. So certainly, I would say it's something that in your businesses needs to have some kind of place. At least the information that you give out on what you can do if there's a problem, and ideally signaling that it's okay to talk about problems. Other big thing that young women are worried about then is employment opportunities. So it does come back to what is these things that we are talking about here, women in business, different genders, gender equality in business. So when I found the statistic, I actually felt we're talking about something extremely relevant in the context of South Africa. And you see it in business clearly also in the numbers. 23% of leadership positions only are filled with women in businesses. So parliament is doing better than business here in South Africa. And only 1 in 5 businesses is founded by women in South Africa. And now this, I found a particular striking statistic. when it comes to venture funding, so to get risk capital raised, only 2% of this funding goes to businesses that are female-led. And this is, the other statistics are also worrying, but this just means that in terms of growing businesses, women are actually much, much worse off. And to balance that, what is particularly ironic is actually that women-led businesses, and by women-led I mean at least one woman in the leadership team. Actually, it's a soft definition. They have a higher chance of becoming profitable and surviving longer. So if you're actually in the shoes of somebody who gives venture capital, you should give much more venture capital to women because they actually make businesses profitable, or to mixed teams. I don't want to just say, women only, but mixed teams also. But it's only 2%. And how do these all come about? Well, I mentioned the lack of access to capital. And I'm going a bit fast here because of time. I mentioned the biases that might be around, like, for example, bias that also in Germany, I can only speak, freely about this. I had the discussion with my co-founder. He says, for this job that we're hiring for, we need somebody who's like, really tough and can talk to these guys in logistics. And I'm like, well, are you serious now? Because it's not only men that can be tough when they're negotiating, right? So sometimes it's you realize this bias that is sneaking in, and you can talk about it, and then maybe you can resolve it. But sometimes it just stays underneath the surface and creates trouble. And then work-life balance challenges for sure. Once you have kids, a lot of things changes. I know this, and that's a challenge if the work model isn't flexible enough, right? So if you can give this flexibility so that more women can participate for longer, that's fantastic. And usually, actually, women will be extremely productive when they have kids. I can assure to that as well, if you give them the chance. And then one of my evergreen topics that in every startup talk I mention, especially women are often not as good in building networks. They're not as focused on it, even though they're very focused on community aspects and everybody feeling good in a community. They don't sort of more proactively go out and network for professional purposes. And there might be good reasons why not, especially, for example, if it's not safe to meet with men for a professional lunch or dinner, right? And I can see how that can be an issue. But also to reach out, at conferences or work meetings or etc., to actually purposefully build professional connections. And that's something that if you have especially younger women in your company, I would always encourage them to think about networking as an active part of their job. It is just as important as it is to think about, working the numbers or building your product, or etc. It's building your networks. And in line and in lockstep with that is also going that women are less likely to build mentorship relationships with more experienced people that can bring them ahead in their professional career. And I guess this is something that I encourage you as leaders of businesses to think about for yourself. That you, if you don't already have one, and the program with GISS ends that is giving some support as well potentially, that you really think about who could be a mentor. Maybe it is somebody from this program, right? And you can ask them, hey, it's been great working with you. Would you mind being my mentor? I would love to have some kind of regular touch point where I can talk through my struggles at work. And that is especially important for leaders of businesses. And not enough women especially do it. And then on the right outlook, before we get to a shortened break, because I'm so glad that you asked questions and we run out of time. or we run out of sufficient time to talk about everything. If you think about inside your company or also with your customers and how to approach them, you will be more successful. And that has just been something that has actually been proven over and over again. I just put out a couple of statistics, right? You get the best financial result if you have about a third of leaders leaders being female or from diverse brands. I would add, because I think it's not about necessarily female, but bringing diversity of viewpoints. If you're a larger company, your share price performance is higher. If you have over 20% board members that are female, you get better financial returns. This was actually also from South Africa, from the Electra Q survey 2025, very recent, around 35% higher financial returns with diverse leadership businesses. And if you only have one woman in the board, not the 30%, which are great, not the 20%, which change something, even just have one, you're 20% less likely to go bankrupt as a business than when you have none, right? So I think that is, oops, saying it all. Oh, and this is very loud. And now I would usually do the 10 minutes break so you can stretch your legs. I would want to cut that to 5 if you can, just to get up, have a drink, maybe open the window, and type 2 numbers into the chat when you come back. One is, what's the percentage of female or diverse employees in your company, if you have them, right? And I think we are some early stage companies here. And the same second percentage number is what is it as part of your leadership personnel. I would be really interested in that. So time for a quick break. I'll put the timer to 5 minutes, and then thank you for putting your numbers in the chat, and we'll be back here with the second part. Well, jumping back in for our last half hour, I just wanted to say, in looking up fun facts about South Africa, I was struck by the fact that you go to bed really late in South Africa. Average is like past midnight. But you get up the earliest of all of the countries that are surveyed at around 6:24. Now you can check this with your own personal time at the clock. So that means you're not getting a lot of sleep. And apart from taking care of gender inclusiveness, please make sure that you sleep enough, especially as a founder or a leadership in your company. If you sleep 5 hours a night, that's just not enough for everybody to live on and be a good leader, right? So take care of yourself. But that's just as a fun fact. I hope you got enough sleep last night, because we have a very quick run through in the last 30 minutes about strategies on how to improve gender inclusiveness and enhance it inside the company and with your customers. And these are the 5 steps I want to talk about. You will see 4 of the 5 on paper here are focusing on inside the company. But I will say, I firmly believe that if you manage to think about and further diverse leadership inside your company, you automatically actually will be thinking about diverse customers in step, right? So I think one thing flows from the others. And just very quickly, right, getting diversity in leadership positions. One thing that I want to impress on you that is coming clear from the research, there is a magic 1/3. It came up in the statistics earlier that I showed you, right? You don't need to have 50-50 on everything. And there will be times when it fluctuates, right? And you need to hire for expertise. You need to hire for who you can get into these positions. But if you at all manage to get 1/3 of your leaders, your more experienced personnel, to be diverse or female, or minorities that you want to have in mind, especially if you want to have them in mind for your customers as well, right? Especially when you're saying, hey, like many of you do, that you want to reach poorer parts of the population, and those are majority Black, for example, then this is especially important that you have this kind of representation in your leadership team for at least 30%, right? So this is the point where things really change a lot in terms of results for companies. Right, so that's a goalpost. And that's definitely not me, is what Leah says. I'll think about that later. Let me just continue. One way to get to that is, of course, get a diverse set of co-founders. But as Mark rightly said, A, you might already be founded, so maybe it's too late. B, you might already achieved it, by the way, when you founded. B is getting co-founders in a good way is probably the most important thing that you can do to start a business, right? And you might not have 100 different people to choose from. It is really the personal fit is the most important. But if you say there's two people, like it was in our case, actually, in my case, there's two people working together, and they might be, all from one background, or two guys, which is often the case when some company gets founded, and you say, hey, we need more expertise in a third field. 3 is often a great number for founder teams. Why don't you actively try to get a woman on board? Yeah, somebody that represents a different perspective. Then number 2, in the next step to get people on board, write job descriptions that show that you're open and that it's important to you to be gender inclusive. Right, this can be about terms that you use, like words that you use, that you're not just looking for a man or a worker, or that you're looking for, depending on your language that you use. There might be male and female terms that you could use, and so then you can make sure to use both, or write at least in a sentence that you welcome applications from all different backgrounds. And you might think, well, this is just a phrase, everybody can write this, but just by putting it, you're signaling to the people that are looking at it that this is something that you have thought about, right? And this automatically will make it more likely that people from different backgrounds apply. The third step, once you do interview people for jobs, interview to minimize the unconscious bias. So what does that mean, right? It can mean that when you have application, and I know companies who really do this and say, they tell me that it has changed their hiring, that when they get applications, they let one of their staff or their assistant or whatever black out the name of the person, right? So that they cannot tell initially from the CV whether it's a man or a woman, or whether it's somebody who is from a Black background, a white background. Maybe sometimes from names you can tell whether they're more well-off or not so well-off people, right? Names can tell a whole lot of things, and also pictures can. And I know also from smaller companies that they sometimes software can do it these days, but sometimes they do it manually, that they kind of black out or hide the name or the picture of people that write applications, and thus changes the way that people hire. And also when you interview people, ideally make sure that you have them interviewed by different people in your company, right? That if you have diverse teams already or diverse leadership teams, that people from different genders are talking to them. And that maybe your team also gets to talk to them if they're coming into a leadership position. So you get a variety of views. And the fourth one, which is, I guess in the context of young companies like yours, not necessarily the first thing, but after some time, it is great to have some promotion paths that are clear, so that it's not just an informal struggle where the people that are more outspoken might have just, tougher elbows and find a way to get promoted, or they ask for promotions more directly. And And for this, it also helps to have formal feedback loops. So, and actually, before you do the promotion path, because I think with young companies, many people don't really expect that, and it's not something that they plan for, that they know, what can I be if I stay here for 10 years? Because the company's like 1 year old, and you know what you expect. But having feedback loops is something that even young companies can do and is so helpful. And by that, I mean that you put it in the calendar already at the beginning of the year, that you talk every 3 months, for example, right? Or at least twice a year on how has it been working together, what are the topics we want to improve, what has been going well. So that type of thing. And that really helps women from and people from diverse backgrounds to have their voices heard and to create these opportunities to talk about difficult topics that they might not have the gut or the will to talk about otherwise. Josephine, you have your hand up.
I think you sort of answered the question I was going to ask, but I'm asking this question on behalf of my team that's on the call, but maybe they should ask that themselves. I know you're speaking in terms of what leadership can do to create a more diverse organization, but I think in terms of also a team member that's maybe not in a leadership position yet, do you have any advice, well, even the team members that are on this call, on what they can do on their side if, guys, maybe I'm not doing a good enough job? So maybe something that they can do as well to make sure that the organization is putting these opportunities for them. And like you said, some are more prone to speak up than others. And also, I think that's also a cultural thing that I've discussed at length with a few people. But I mean, what advice would you give them on their side?
Yeah. Well, to have a heart and kind of ask for some of the things from a perspective of, hey, yeah, I really want to do a good job, and it would help me be able to do that if we had regular feedback meetings. And then, kind of stick them in the calendar so that it's not they don't have to fight for it every time, right? So kind of create, ideally at the beginning of any working relationship, take an hour, right, and put it, I mean, with electronic calendars, I think sometimes it's easier, to say, hey, can we talk about this? I can put something in your calendar and make sure, Josephine, that it works around your schedule. I'd really love to have half an hour to talk about how and when we're going to talk about feedback, and how we can touch base on how things are going. And then having this space in the calendar is already half the battle won, because then you have the occasion, right? And even before you get into that meeting, you'll think about these topics, and that is already so valuable. So I mean, also from juniors, like really do ask for these things to be regular, and that's easiest done when you start afresh. For sure, but it's then much easier, even if you're not constantly the person to say, at the end of every meeting, hey, can we just talk what went well and what did not go so well? I mean, that's very hard, right? Especially as a junior. But if you have something in the calendar that is agreed to, then it's much easier. That's my number one top thing. And yeah, I mean, sometimes. And this is a more advanced, but what we had in Share, what I've really valued is, and it was half. It was sort of part from the juniors, part also from the senior team, that we thought we need something like this, is that we, and we were already like 30, 40 people at the time. We said, hey, let's create a formal setup for the more junior employees and actually a range of employees through the company to meet talk about people's work issues inside the company. We called it the People's Committee. And then we had rotating leadership of that, so to say, that then had a spot with the management team once a month to also anonymously bring topics up that people were moved about, right? So we created some kind of like semi-formal representation so that people that would be afraid to directly talk to the founders, for example, about any particular issue, they could bring it up in the People's Committee, and the committee could then go to their 1 hour per month and say, hey, people have concerns about working too much here. I'm especially on whatever, or short deadlines, or changing, like things that you might be afraid to bring up yourself. You can bring up through the group of people that has a representation, so to say, with the leadership team. Maybe that helps a little bit. Leah, you have your hand up.
Thanks, Iris. I think this also comes back to my initial point about the cultural context, right? Because I think cultural contexts are different, and certain societies are maybe a little bit more kind of hierarchical structured in terms of also power dimensions. And but I think the last point you made actually answered to my point that I wanted to make, that I think this is a really great mechanism to install this kind of having like a people's committee or an employee kind of forum, representative of staff, to give feedback to the management of somebody that is kind of mandated and is talking on their behalf without even naming people. And I think this is something maybe where the cultural context is then kind of balanced out in terms of hierarchical kind of things, because Germany works differently to Bangladesh or to South Africa or so on. Thanks for that.
And it's different to talk out in a group of peers rather than to your superiors. So that makes it initially easier. I will also say, as a leader, and in Germany, this is definitely true. I'm not sure about the South African context. We also wanted to have this representation so that anything that bubbles up with the employees is actually addressed. Because if that isn't done, then there's a formal mechanism that is, by law, that there can be a representation, and that is actually very bothersome. And especially in small companies, a lot of administrative work, and there's not necessarily trust, between those different forums. And so we wanted to avoid people get so unsatisfied that they go through like a formal route, which then creates all sorts of problems for the leadership later on. So it was very much in the interest of the leadership to be proactive about this, so that we create a forum for people to talk to each other about their problems. Actually, sometimes it makes problems bigger because people are like, "Oh God, we work too much." Yeah. "Oh, you're also working too much." Yeah, I'm also working too much, and they kind of get all worked up about it. But in general, it takes the tensions out rather than in, is what we found. I might have to go very quick on some of these things. I'll basically be very quick on securing financing, because I think it's not necessarily the topic that is most relevant in your context. But I just want to stress that, especially, as I said earlier, women in particular are often not proactive enough around raising money from outside, especially also in the South African context, as the numbers show. And when they have higher barriers too, right? But it is important this is one golden phrase: raise capital when you can and not when you need it. That if you have a good traction, if there is a bright patch in your business and you think I might need more capital at some point to grow, that you then kind of go in and think about this, rather when you're already out of cash, essentially. And there's really no good way to put it. Women can find other women that have done this before as a support, but it is hard. And it's hard for everyone, and it's harder as a woman. So if you can find buddies or mentors, that's particularly important and valuable in this area. And then, just one thing about self-exploitation, that is also something where I find that women in particular, and potentially other minorities in leadership, are bad about this. They often see themselves as some kind of free resource that they're happily exploiting because they don't, they can decide how much money they pay themselves. And that is kind of not really healthy in the long run. Again, I have to go quick, but one sentence that I keep in mind that has been shown true also in professional sports, which is a good example, is that the athletes that do best are those that are the best at resting. So actually, your performance increases when you manage to, shut off, and go and really recover, rather than getting worse and worse and worse over time because you're overworked and overstretched. And so make sure that you're taking care of yourself in the financial sense as well. Okay, looking at the time. And again, this might not be the most relevant to your situations as I hear it right now, but offering some sort of training on biases like this one, but and you can find it in small context, more specific context, online. It signals to your colleagues that this is something that you're willing to talk about. Again, that is the main purpose as a leader. And also one other point that I want to take from this is that minorities are often the least likely to ask for professional training or help because they think it's too expensive, or they're not sort of worth it to get trained, and they have to do it all by themselves, or they're shy. So if you can include this in your feedback rounds, is there something where you feel unsure and we might want to organize some kind of training, or I connect you up to somebody who can teach you something on Excel, right? How to do Excel, how to do presentations, whatever it is. And sometimes if that's too expensive, we organize peer learning sessions a lot within my company. And that actually was very successful, and it made people feel valued. And I think this is very important, but I also have to go fast. There's this famous saying by Peter Drucker, some kind of management guru of older times, but it's still true. Culture eats strategy for breakfast, meaning you can plan all sorts of things for your company in terms of financials and investment and customer acquisition, etc. But if the fabric in your company of people working together doesn't work, or doesn't create the right energy, then you will fail, right? So some ways to make sure that the culture in your company does get better. We talked about it, right? The inclusive hiring practice. I'm a firm believer in the flexible work arrangements. If you can somehow make it possible so that women can still participate when they have had kids. And also men, of course. Even for men, it's attractive to be able to do that. And what I haven't mentioned yet is rituals. I love rituals. So we had, for example, like a stretching hour or stretching 5 minutes every afternoon at 3. And then have somebody play like a gong, and people would get up, get in a circle, do some stretching, have a chat, and maybe drink something, and then go back to work. And that was really nice. We had some others too, but this was one example. It was really nice that people got to know each other as people and kind of got something else to talk about. Also really good to get up and get the blood flowing, right? So take it seriously, take social seriously. They're part of the work. They're part of building this culture that is so essential. And if you haven't already done it, make sure that you also sit down in your leadership team to talk about like what's the kind of culture we want to have, what are our values that we want to promote, that you kind of write it down, show it somewhere. All of this, it's enormously helpful to create this environment, and it signals to your employees that you have an open door and that these things are important to you. And now we have not enough time about the customer and the gender lens with your customer part. But I'm glad that we already had some examples of this coming up. I want to rush through. Basically, it's 1 minute per item, and maybe some of you can stay a few minutes longer about some tactics to think about gender inclusion with your customers. One is using inclusive language and imagery, right? With the aim of making sure that all your potential customers are actually feeling addressed. I'm saying potential because there might well be products that naturally attract 95% women or 95% men. But if you don't know that 100%, then you want to make sure that you're catching a diverse set of people, right? That you use a language or images on your in your marketing, on your products that mean, hey, I could be that person in this picture, and therefore this product is relevant to me, right? And that helps also to use neutral terms so as to give people the impression I could be the one that is addressed here, right? I heard there's some languages like Easy Zulu, which has gender neutral nouns. Germany, this is actually quite difficult sometimes, but if you have that in your language and it works in your slogans, that would be really cool to use. I gave an example, right, on a refill station. You want to have pictures of people, of men and women, or black and white people, or whoever you think you want to address, so as to signal to them that those can be customers as well. I'd love to hear an example, but I'll just run through the tools, and then if we have more time, we'll talk about that. And then, make sure that you're designing your products for diverse realities, right? So, for example, if you're having a product that can also be bought by women, which is hopefully a lot of your products, that it's actually reachable by them if they don't have the same means of mobility as wealthier or male customers might have, right? So that you're bringing either bringing the product to them, or often offer flexible hours or collection points or drop-off points for bringing back containers, right? That make sure that, for example, women can get safely to the points when those points are open. And so, sometimes technology can help. I give you an example here of giving SMS-based info when stuff is happening, so that women know I don't have to wait around, for example, to refill. I know when things are happening, and it doesn't expose me to a risk of sort of lingering around somewhere. Pricing is a whole different topic, and we can talk for 2 hours on that alone to different customers. But I guess the golden ticket here is to have, if you can, tiered pricing to different groups of customers. That's not always possible. Sometimes you can do this in terms of loyalty benefits. And sometimes if it's really, this is really advanced, you can do this kind of tiered pricing or payment system also to make sure that people can pay in installments, so that it's easier for them to afford something if they cannot bring the whole amount for a product right away, right? And since I'm running out of time, I'm not going through all of this, but basically this comes with identifying your customers well and understanding what are their financial capabilities that you want to address. And then coming to the last points, if you design a product and a service, ideally do workshops with a diverse set of possible customers, right? To co-create and understand their concerns. So Mark, if you know that the visibility is a problem for them, and I don't have the answer on how to solve it, maybe your customers will have some answer if you actually talk to them. And maybe it doesn't turn out to be an issue, but some other thing is an issue. That maybe it's hard to read how you write on the screens or something, right? So some of the problems, you think you have the problems figured out why something's not working. But if you don't have a sort of somewhat representative sample of customers, go and co-create it with them, you will actually not find out what's the real issue there, right? So for example, with Share, we had in our minds, and I just mentioned it because I found it really funny, we had in our minds this idea that if we write on our products that this product is donating, for example, donating one meal for every snack bar sold, that people will take issue with the word donation because it can sound, like old-fashioned or backwards or demeaning to people. And so we avoided the word donating, and we came up with all sorts of other words of describing what we're doing. And then only like half a year after, it might kind of reasonably worked because the product itself was good. And so people bought it. But we realized, talking to customers, that they didn't understand what we mean because we had thought so intensively about our product that we thought, it's totally clear what we want to say. We just don't want to use the word donation. And then we realized, people had no idea what it means when we said we give a meal to somebody else. Sometimes they thought, in the German it worked that way, that they thought if you're eating this bar, you are as full as if you had a whole meal. So they thought, oh, this really fills me up. And I'm like, no, this is not what we meant. So we better talk to the customers because we were just going in circles around an issue that was not an issue for our customer at all. That was just in our heads. So women cooperatives are great place if they exist in your area, and you're designing, for example, your kits on how to reuse something. Do the people that want to address actually understand the instructions? Do they understand what they need to do? And maybe they find a better way to do it, right? And last and very much not least, safety and maybe piggybacking on existing structures to create that safety so that people have some trust in the way your product is sold, right? So this is something that is very obvious around, if you have a retail store in a retail outlet, or you have a center where you're selling something, make sure that it's, properly lit, that there's staff that is trained on how to treat customers and what not to do, that there's a mechanism that addresses in your workshop if there's some issue on how the staff treats your customers, etc. So it's really a lot of things in the design to think about. And what can often help you is to use existing structures. So I mentioned the women's cooperatives or local NGOs, sometimes churches, to really understand the communities that you're working with. And I'm running out of time. So I just wanted to, if you have the chance and you're still here, you haven't run out, if you have one particular issue that you brought up, like Mark's screens, that you want to address, that you please do so. Else, I'm coming to the end of the presentation, and we totally didn't have the Q&A time. I really packed way too much into this presentation, and you had amazing questions. Then I will say that if you don't have the question now, I'm very happy if GIZ distributes my contact details to follow up on something. In fact, extremely happy if you're engaged further with the topic or want further resources. And we'll just say we talked about many topics, about many possibilities, about many things that you can do in your company, and they all sound potentially very burdensome to you because you already have so much to do in your everyday life, just to stay afloat, just to get that product launched, just to do the next step right, just to survive the next half year. So I want to just bring one last quote from somebody that you might know, Adrian Gore, CEO of Discovery in South Africa. Again, coming back to the why we're doing all this, right? And I want to really stress again, and one last time, it is not that we're just focused on equality and inclusion because it's the right thing to do, and 100% believe it's the right thing to do in itself and by itself. But it is also because it makes us better at what we're doing. It's better at understanding it makes us better at understanding our customers, better at retaining good people in your company, and better at being this innovative company that you're trying to be to survive in the market. So yeah, do find some time and space, add it as a layer of your processes, that you make decisions in your company and for your customers, that there might be people that are very different from you, and that would help to bring them into the fold to create better companies. And with that, let's take Leah as the, sorry to say, last voice today. Leah.
No, thank you so much, Iris. I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate everybody that joined the call today. And I think it was super insightful and great that we got the conversation started in between.
Yeah.
I have one particular question, and I've noted a couple of questions in the chat already. But I think one of the things also linking it back to reuse, right? And you did the linkage in the last couple of slides, but is how do you really ensure that, for example, that the reuse process is gender equal and responds to a gender inclusive approach?
Yeah.
Because this is sometimes where I'm struggling to, okay, how do you put one and one and one and one and one of so many different things that a small business has to think about together?
Yeah, and it's a lot, right? And that's why I think the easiest is to start in a place where how to say it, if you get the core right, then other things will follow automatically, and you don't have to control everything and think about everything yourself. And what I mean by that is two things. One is start in your own company and your surroundings to surround yourself with people that have a diversity of viewpoints or ideally backgrounds as well. And that includes gender, of course, because they will help you think about these things, right? So you don't have, as a leader, to think about everything. And the other thing really is co-creation with the customer. So if you say, I have this product and this is my product version 1, and I just created it by myself from what I think is true. That's often how it goes. That's great. But then as early as possible, try to really go and walk the customer journey with a variety of different customers alongside, right? So really try to map out how could it work, and then go to potential customers and say, what does your daily routine look like? Here is what we could offer. Would this work for you? Is this how you would go and refill? Is this how you would, how would you have, when would you have the chance to bring back the containers? Why would you not bring back the containers, right? And it's kind of try to get that picture in your head of how the typical customer journey, like the real physical journey that often is, how it looks like, right? And then work with people to do that. Because what doesn't work, I guess, is to try to think about all potential issues from your own desk. And that becomes very quickly overwhelming. And that's very natural because you're not 20 different people, right? And it cannot be expected from you to think for 20 different people from different ethnicities, background, genders, level of education. That's just too much for any one person. But what you can do is interact with these different people and get their feedback, and then design something that works either as one product for most of them or as different products for different groups. And I really cannot stress this enough. I think often we think about this is our product and this is our customer, but it almost always is much more complex than that. And that is very much a standard thing that you should do, that segmentation, right, into what are the different groups. And that's such that it's even standard business practice. But I think the next step for inclusion is really to co-create more and really just do the product development together. And yeah, but I think if you have a diverse team, again, it will take some of the burden off of you, because you will have more different viewpoints that are not just in you as a founder or a leader.
I was just from my end, if I may just say, such a well-researched presentation, so many probing thoughts, comments that you've made. I mean, clearly, one needs a lot more time for this subject, but just from my side and everybody on the call now, thank you very, very much. It's been really, really interesting, probing, as I said, and I just wish you absolutely well. And thank you very, very much. I don't know if there are any last minute questions at all from the team. Otherwise, we can sign off.
Oh, I forgot the box about the higher profits. Oh my God. Thank you, Tony. It made me click forward because I actually wanted to say thank you. The 25% higher profit, 35%. Well, you get the picture, but thank you so much, Tony. And apologies that I ran over time. Please do reach out if there's something more specific.
I will share your contact details.
And I fully understand that I'm not 100% familiar with your individual context. So sometimes I cannot get more specific because it would be preposterous. It would be, it would give you a false sense of security. You have to do the work yourself. But I hope that I could give some ideas on how to get started on thinking about the problems and finding the problems that can then give you better solutions in the end.